His phone buzzed once. A short text from Noah, the photographer already positioned inside. "She just walked in." Marcus Reed didn't move right away. He stood near the far end of the entrance hall of the River Cafe Brooklyn, his back half turned to the glittering room ahead. Through the tall glass windows, the Brooklyn Bridge stretched across the early evening sky, and Manhattan's skyline burned gold in the distance. Beautiful. Indifferent. Just like this city had always been. He looked down at his left wrist. The old Citizen watch, scratched, slightly faded on the band, sat there the way it always did, out of place against his dark tailored vest. He never replaced it. He never would. 10 years. He exhaled slowly. Tonight. He stepped to the doorway and let his eyes move across the room. Crystal chandeliers, white roses on every table, and 200 guests dressed in money, a string quartet playing something soft near the windows, and Cole Whitfield at the front of the room, shaking hands, smiling the way men smile when they've already won. Marcus found her in 11 seconds, table near the back, last row. The seat closest to the exit. Of course it was. She was wearing a navy dress, simple, borrowed looking. Her dark hair was pulled up neatly. Her back was straight in the way people hold themselves straight when they're trying not to look like they're struggling. She was looking at her phone. On the screen, he could not see it clearly from this distance, but he knew. A photo of a little girl with curly hair and a stuffed bear. She smiled at the screen. Small. Private. Just for herself. No one else in that room noticed her. Marcus noticed everything. And then the processional music changed. The room shifted. Guests rose or turned. The groom's entrance had begun, and Marcus watched, still unmoving, as Mara Sutton slowly looked up from her phone. He saw the exact moment it happened. Her chin lifted. Her eyes found the man walking down the aisle, and in the space of one breath, her entire body went still. Not surprised, not confused, frozen. The way a person freezes when the thing they buried for 4 years walks back into the room in a tuxedo, about to marry someone else. And she realizes, with ice spreading through her chest, that the gray eyes she has looked at every single morning belong to her daughter. Mara did not run. She did not stand up, did not make a sound, did not spill her water glass or drop her phone. She simply sat there, back straight, her hands folded on the white tablecloth, and stopped breathing for 4 full seconds. Around her, the room was rising, guests smiling, turning, some lifting phones to take photos of the groom's entrance. The string quartet shifted into something warmer. Someone near the front laughed at something Cole said as he passed their table. The whole room was alive with the easy joy of people who had no reason to feel otherwise. Mara felt none of it. Her brain did what it always did under pressure. It skipped the emotion entirely and went straight to detail. Small things. Specific things. The kind of things other people walked past without noticing, like the fact that her rent had not increased last year. Mrs. Chen downstairs had complained for 3 weeks straight about the new rate, $200 more starting January. But Mara's notice never came. She had assumed an error, filed it away, moved on. Like the fact that Mr. Rodriguez at the grocery store, her store, the one on Junction Boulevard where she had worked the register for 3 years, had called a staff meeting one Tuesday morning and announced a company-wide raise. New supply partner, he had said, smiling wider than usual. Good contract. Everyone benefits. Mara had taken the extra $180 a month and bought Gracie a proper winter coat and did not ask a single question. Like the scholarship. The one for Gracie's preschool. The good one on the clean block. The one Mara had applied to only because Dottie had filled out half the form herself and slid it under Mara's door with a sticky note that said, "Just send it." The award letter came back 6 weeks later, a donor listed as anonymous. Mara had bowed her head that night and thanked God and luck and the universe in that order. She had never once considered that luck might have a name. Now, watching Cole Whitfield smile at his guests from the front of the room, that same slow tilt of the head, that same gray-eyed calm she saw every morning on her daughter's face, Mara felt the floor shift beneath her chair. Her phone buzzed. A photo from Dottie, Gracie, crayon in hand, holding up a drawing, a family, a woman, a small girl. And beside them, a figure with no face, only a yellow circle like a sun. Underneath, in unsteady 4-year-old letters, D-A-D-D-Y. Mara stared at the screen, then looked up at Cole. For the first time in 4 years, what she felt was not exhaustion. It was anger. Marcus Reed was 26 years old the night he lost everything at Queen's Station. Not metaphorically, literally. One backpack yanked from his shoulder by a man in a gray hoodie who was gone before Marcus even turned around. Inside that bag, a used laptop with every line of code for his first startup, an external hard drive, his passport, and $200 cash. Everything he owned after buying a one-way ticket from Chicago. He chased the man half a block, lost him at the corner, stood on the sidewalk breathing hard, hands empty. He walked back to the station entrance and sat down on the concrete steps outside a small grocery store. The cold came through his jacket immediately. People moved past him in both directions. Workers heading home, a couple arguing quietly, a teenager with headphones, a woman pulling a cart. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked down. He was invisible in the most crowded way possible. He sat there for a long time, elbows on his knees, staring at the pavement. He had grown up without a father, aged out of a group home in the Bronx at 18, and taught himself everything he knew from library computers and second-hand books. He was not a man who cried easily. But that night, on those steps, he came very close. Then something appeared beside his left foot, a small paper bag. No one had said a word. He had not heard footsteps approach or leave. He looked up. A girl in a green grocery store apron was already walking back toward the entrance, her back to him, ponytail swinging. He opened the bag. A sandwich, a bottle of Deer Park water, and a paper napkin with a handwritten note. Ask for Sergeant Mills. He's good. Followed by a phone number for the local precinct. He looked up again. The girl had stopped at the door, one hand on the frame. She did not turn around. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. Today was bad, but tomorrow is still coming. Then she went inside. Marcus sat with the sandwich and the water, and that sentence for 2 full hours. He left without asking her name. But he kept the napkin, and he kept the old citizen watch still on his wrist, the one thing the thief had not taken. And every time he looked at it in the years that followed, he heard her voice saying those 8 words. 10 years later, the first search he ran on the morning Forbes called him a billionaire was not about markets or competitors. He typed, Mara Sutton, Queens, New York. Finding her took less than a day. Marcus had resources by then that most people could not imagine. Quiet, efficient, discreet. By the following morning, he had a name confirmed, an address, and a photograph taken from a public social media profile. The profile had not been updated in over a year. The last photo showed a young woman holding a newborn, eyes red from crying, or exhaustion, or both, smiling anyway. He drove to Queens himself, did not send anyone else. He parked on the street outside her building on a Tuesday afternoon and sat in the car for 20 minutes before getting out. The building was a 5-floor walk-up on a narrow block off Jamaica Avenue. The buzzer panel had 3 broken labels, and the front door had a crack in the lower glass panel sealed with tape that had turned yellow. He stood in the hallway outside apartment 3B and listened. Inside, a child was laughing. High and clear, the laugh of someone completely unconcerned with the world. Then Mara's voice. "Gracie, do not climb that." And more laughing. Marcus stood at that door for 15 minutes. He did not knock. He told himself it was because she would think he pitied her. He told himself she deserved better than a stranger arriving with money and good intentions she never asked for. He told himself he would come back when he had figured out the right thing to say. He drove away. He started making quiet arrangements instead. He contacted the building management company through a third party and covered the gap that kept her rent from increasing. But he had Reed Ventures sign a supply contract with the grocery store on Junction Boulevard. Legitimate, fair, the kind that allowed Mr. Rodriguez to give his staff a raise without any conditions attached. When Dottie Crane submitted a scholarship application for a preschool on Gracie's behalf, a fund Marcus had created 6 months earlier approved it the same week. He came back once more, 2 years later. This time he knocked. Mara opened the door. She looked at him the way you look at a stranger. "Can I help you?" he said. "Sorry, wrong floor." He walked back down the stairs, sat in his car, and did not start the engine for 20 minutes. Dottie had seen him from her window both times. She came downstairs on the second visit, knocked on his car window, and looked at him with the steady eyes of a woman who had spent 25 years reading people in a courtroom. "Who are you to her?" Marcus looked straight ahead. "Nobody." Dottie studied him for a long moment. "You are the worst liar I have ever met, and I have met several hundred." She walked back inside. He watched her go, and the next morning he called her. Dottie Crane answered on the second ring. She had already known his name by then. She had looked up the license plate from his car after the second visit. 25 years as a court clerk taught a person certain habits, and one of them was that you never let an unknown variable sit unidentified for long. She listened to Marcus explain himself for 4 minutes without interrupting. Who he was, what Mara had done for him at Queen's Station 10 years ago, what he had been doing quietly since finding her address. When he finished, Dottie was silent for a moment. Then she said, "She will never accept it if she knows it comes from you." "I know," Marcus said. "And you are comfortable with that?" He looked out the window of his office on the 34th floor. Below, Manhattan moved in every direction at once, indifferent and relentless. "I'm more comfortable with that than with her struggling and me doing nothing." Another pause. Then Dottie said, "All right, but I want one thing clear. If this ever stops being about her and starts being about you feeling better about yourself, I will tell her everything. Every last detail. Are we agreed?" "Agreed," Marcus said. That conversation was 4 years ago. In the time since, Marcus and Dottie had spoken perhaps 40 times, and he never visited the building again. She gave him updates when something urgent came up. Gracie's ear infection in February, a leak in Mara's ceiling that the super was ignoring, the month Mara had to choose between medication and groceries. Each time Marcus handled it quietly, through channels that left no fingerprints. He told himself it was enough. Then one morning, Dottie called with a different tone entirely. "I need to tell you something." Mara received a wedding invitation. Marcus turned away from his window. "From who?" "A family connection on her mother's side." "The wedding is at the River Cafe in Brooklyn next month." Dottie paused. "The groom's name is Cole Whitfield." 10 seconds of silence. "I know that name," Marcus said quietly. "I thought you might." He picked up his vest from the chair. "What is the date?" Dottie told him. Then she asked the question she had been holding for 4 years. "Marcus, When are you going to stop standing outside her door? He did not answer immediately. But this time, for the first time, he did not say, never. The processional ended. Guests settled back into their seats. The ceremony itself was brief, polished, rehearsed, the kind of wedding that had been organized by a professional planner with a significant budget and zero tolerance for surprise. Cole Whitfield stood at the altar with the ease of a man completely in control of his surroundings. He smiled at the right moments. He held Victoria's hand at the right angle for the photographer. He said his vows in a clear, steady voice. Mara watched all of it from the last table in the room. She had spent the ceremony doing the only thing she knew how to do when her emotions became unmanageable, she observed. She cataloged the slight tension in Cole's left shoulder when the officiant mentioned the word commitment. The way Victoria's thumb pressed once, firmly, against Cole's knuckle when he paused a half-second too long before saying, I do. Small things, things no one else was looking for. After the ceremony, when the room shifted into cocktail hour and the noise level rose and guests began moving between tables, Mara stayed in her seat. She was calculating the exact number of minutes she needed to wait before leaving without it appearing rude. She was at 11 minutes when Cole sat down beside her. He did not hesitate at the table, did not glance around first. He pulled out the chair, sat, adjusted his cufflinks once, and looked at her with an expression she could not immediately name. Not guilt, not shock. Something more controlled than both. Mara. Her name in his mouth after 5 years sounded like a word in a language she had stopped speaking. I didn't expect to see you here. She kept her hands flat on the tablecloth. I could say the same. I've thought about reaching out, he said. Many times. I want you to know that. I didn't have a choice back then. Not the way it looked. She studied his face carefully. His eyes were moving in small, controlled sweeps. Not toward her, toward the room. Toward Victoria, standing 40 feet away with a champagne flute, not looking in their direction, or appearing not to. You had a daughter, Mara said quietly. Did you know that? 4 years old, gray eyes. She watched his face. She tilts her head to the right when she's thinking. Cole went completely still. It was the stillness that told her everything. Not grief, not remorse. Calculation. In the 3 seconds he sat motionless, his eyes moved once, quickly, involuntarily, toward Victoria. And Mara understood. He had not come to this table because he felt guilty. He had come because he needed to know exactly how much she knew before his new wife found out. Mara did not look away from him. She had learned, in 4 years of handling everything alone, that silence was more effective than questions. Silence made people fill the space, and Cole Whitfield, despite the tailored suit and the composed expression, was already filling it. I didn't know, he said. His voice was lower now. About a child. I swear to you, Mara, no one told me. No one told you, she repeated. Not a question. Flat. Precise. If I had known, you signed a document, Mara said. 1 week after the last time I saw you. A legal document surrendering rights to any child that might result from our relationship. She watched the color change slightly at the edge of his jaw. So either you knew, or someone made that decision for you. Which one is it, Cole? A long pause. The cocktail hour noise moved around them like water around 2 stones. It was Preston, he finally said. The name came out quietly, like he had been holding it for a long time, and was relieved to put it down. Victoria's father. He came to me. I was 29. My brother had just opened a restaurant. His whole life savings. Preston told me if I didn't walk away cleanly, he would make sure the city inspector found enough violations to shut it down permanently. Mara said nothing. David had nothing to do with any of it, Cole said. He still doesn't know. It was my mess, and He stopped, pressed his thumb against the tablecloth. I told myself you would be fine, that it wasn't serious enough between us to matter long term. I told myself a lot of things. And the document? Preston's lawyer drew it up. I signed it the same day. Mara looked at him for a long moment. He was not lying. She could see that. But she could also see that his honesty right now was not for her. It was a pressure valve. He was releasing just enough truth to manage the situation. So you chose your brother, she said quietly. And you left me. He did not deny it. The difference between us, Cole, Mara said, rising slowly from her chair, is that I didn't get to choose. I just had to keep going. She walked away from the table without looking back, and Cole sat alone in the chair with the posture of a man who had just confirmed, in his own quiet admission, that he had known the cost and paid it with someone else's life. Victoria Ashby did not follow Cole to Mara's table. She watched. That was what Victoria did best. She watched, she processed, and she decided. Reacting was for people who had not prepared. Victoria had spent her entire adult life preparing. She had known Cole was moving toward the back table before he was halfway across the room. She had tracked it in her peripheral vision while maintaining full eye contact with the deputy mayor's wife and nodding at exactly the right intervals in their conversation about the renovation of a brownstone on Park Slope. When Cole sat down, Victoria had excused herself gracefully, handed her champagne flute to a passing server, and walked to the hallway. She called her father from the corridor near the coat check. He answered on the first ring. "She's here," Victoria said. A brief pause. "I see." You knew. It was not a question. She had already heard it in the single syllable of his response, the particular flatness that her father's voice took on when he was managing information rather than receiving it. "You knew before I did. Victoria, did you arrange for her to be on the guest list?" "Of course not. It is a family connection on the bride's side. Coincidence." "You don't believe in coincidence." Another pause. Longer this time. "Handle it quietly," Preston said. "You know what needs to happen." Victoria ended the call. She stood in the corridor for a moment, looking at nothing in particular. Then she called her personal attorney, Rachel, and asked her to pull up the prenuptial agreement immediately, specifically the clause regarding prior undisclosed relationships and any potential third-party claims. Rachel asked if everything was all right. "Pull the document," Victoria said. "I will call you back." She walked to the powder room, checked that it was empty, removed a pre-prepared envelope from her small clutch, the kind of thing Victoria Ashby did not leave to chance on important days, and waited. 3 minutes later, the door opened. Mara stepped inside. Victoria held out the envelope without theatrics. Inside, $50,000 in a certified bank draft and a non-disclosure agreement prepared by her law firm's senior partner. "You have a child to raise?" Victoria said, her voice perfectly level. "This is a practical offer, nothing personal." Mara picked up the envelope, looked inside, set it back down on the marble counter without touching the contents. Then she looked directly at Victoria and said, "How much did your family pay the first time?" Victoria's expression did not break, but her left hand, the one holding her phone, tightened once. One small, involuntary movement. Mara saw it, and walked out. The hallway outside the powder room was quiet. Mara stood with her back against the wall, eyes closed, taking one slow breath, and the kind of breath you take when you need your body to catch up with your brain. $50,000. She thought about what $50,000 would mean. 12 months of rent without counting. Gracie's preschool for the next 4 years. A used car that actually started in January. The dental work Mara had been postponing since the previous spring. She thought about all of it in the time it took to exhale. Then she thought about what $50,000 was actually for. Her eyes opened. A man was standing a few feet away, near the window at the end of the corridor. He was not looking at her. He was looking out at the Brooklyn Bridge, hands relaxed at his sides. Dark suit, well-fitted, the kind that suggested real money without announcing it. He looked to be in his mid-30s. Strong jaw, a dark hair worn short, and on his left wrist, visible below the cuff of his jacket, an old watch. Scratched face. Worn leather band, the kind of watch that did not belong anywhere near this event. Something about it snagged her attention in a way she could not immediately explain. He turned, as if he had heard her thinking. "Do you need some air?" he asked. Straightforward. No performance behind it. She looked at him carefully. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what Victoria Ashby generally does in a powder room at events like this," he said, "and someone who would suggest you not make any decisions based on what she just offered you." Mara went very still. "How do you know what she offered me?" He did not answer that directly. He simply nodded toward the far end of the corridor, where a set of glass doors opened onto a narrow balcony overlooking the water. 2 minutes of air. That is all I am suggesting. She should have said no. She knew that. But something in the steadiness of his voice, the absence of agenda in it, or what felt like absence, made her follow. Outside, the evening air came off the East River cool and direct. The Manhattan skyline stood across the water, every light precise and indifferent. He handed her a glass of water from a passing server's tray without asking if she wanted it. She looked down at his wrist again. "That watch," she said slowly. "It doesn't match anything you're wearing." He looked down at it. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "It's the only thing a thief didn't take from me once," he said quietly. 10 years ago, at a train station in Queens." He looked up. "Someone sat me down that night and told me tomorrow was still coming. I never forgot it. Or her." He held her gaze for exactly 1 second longer than a stranger would. "My name is Marcus Reed, Mara." She did not speak for a long moment. The name meant something. She had seen it once or twice in a headline, the kind of business story she scrolled past on her phone during break at the register. Reed Ventures, Manhattan. Something about a technology acquisition. She had not read beyond the headline. It had nothing to do with her life, except, apparently, it did. "That again," she said. "Queens Station. 10 years ago. November. You were working a shift at the grocery store on the corner." His voice was unhurried. "Someone grabbed my bag. None, you left a paper bag on the steps with a sandwich and a water and a note about a police sergeant." Mara stared at him. She remembered it. Not completely. She had been 18, working doubles that month to cover her father's electric bill, and the days had blurred together. But she remembered a man on the steps outside, the way he was sitting. Not drunk, not dangerous, just emptied out. The way a person looks when the thing holding them together has just come loose. "That was you," she said. "That was me." She turned and looked out at the water. Her mind was already moving, the way it always moved. Not through emotion, but through sequence. Through detail. Through the small, specific things that did not add up until suddenly they did. Tientue. The rent that never increased when every neighbor's did. The supply contract that let Mr. Rodriguez give his staff a raise with no conditions attached. The preschool scholarship with no donor name. "How long?" she said quietly. Not a full question. She did not need to finish it. 4 years, Marcus said. "Since I found your address." "You found my address?" "Yes. And instead of knocking on my door, you just—" She stopped. pressed her fingers briefly against the balcony railing. You rearranged things, quietly, without asking me. Yes. Do you understand, she said, turning to face him, how that feels? To find out your life has been adjusted by someone you didn't know was watching? Marcus did not look away. I do, and I was wrong not to tell you. I will not argue that point. The directness of it, the complete absence of excuse, stopped her momentum slightly. She looked at his watch again, then at his face. You came here today knowing Cole would be here. Yes, you know something. I know several things, he said. And tonight, if you want them, I will tell you all of it. But I need you to know one thing first. He held her gaze steadily. I did not come here to rescue you. I came here because you are the only person in my life who ever stopped walking when I had nothing. And I am done standing on the wrong side of your door. Mara stepped away from the balcony railing and called Dottie. It rang twice. Dottie picked up with the particular alert tone of someone who had been expecting the call. Are you all right? Dottie asked immediately. No, Mara said. It was the most honest answer she had given anyone all evening. Dottie, Marcus Reed, tell me what you know. A silence. The kind that confirmed something rather than denying it. He found you 4 years ago, Dottie said finally. He sat outside in his car for a long time the first day. I watched from my window. He came back a second time and knocked. You opened the door, said hello to a stranger, and he told you he had the wrong floor. Then he sat in his car again. Mara closed her eyes briefly. I went down to talk to him that second time, Dottie continued. He told me what you had done for him years ago. I believed him. He asked if there was anything he could do without making you feel. Without making me feel like a charity case, Mara said. Without making you feel like you owed anyone anything, Dottie said quietly. Those were his exact words. Mara exhaled slowly. She wanted to be angry. She was angry. But underneath the anger there was something more complicated that she did not have time to examine right now. Dottie, what else have you been keeping? Another pause. Longer. 5 years ago, Dottie said. Before you knew you were pregnant, a man came to see me. He was well dressed, older. He knew your name, knew where you lived, knew you had been seeing someone. He offered me money, a significant amount, to encourage you to move away from Queens. He said it would be better for everyone. Mara's hand tightened around the phone. I told him to leave, Dottie said, but I wrote everything down. The date, what he said, the amount he offered, his face. A pause. I have kept that notebook for 5 years, Mara. A red cover. It is in my kitchen drawer right now. Who was he? I did not know his name that day. But 3 months later, I saw his face on the evening news. Dottie's voice was steady and certain. It was Senator Preston Ashby. The line went quiet. Through the glass doors behind her, Mara could see the wedding reception continuing. Glasses raised, music playing, 200 people celebrating inside a perfect room. She stood on the outside of all of it and felt something settle in her chest. Not peace. Something harder than peace. Clarity. Dottie, she said, bring the notebook. Marcus was waiting when she came back inside. He did not ask what Dottie had said. He read her face the way a person reads a face when they have been paying attention to someone for a long time. Quietly, without drawing attention to the fact that they are doing it. There is someone you need to speak to, he said. He led her to a quieter section near the back corridor, away from the main reception floor. A man was waiting there. Mid-30s, camera bag over one shoulder, press lanyard tucked into his shirt pocket. He looked like what he was, the event photographer. He also looked like someone carrying more than camera equipment. This is Noah Carr, Marcus said. Noah reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced a small USB drive. He held it between 2 fingers, and looked at Mara directly before speaking. 5 years ago, I was doing street photography in Midtown, commercial district, early evening, natural light. I was shooting architecture mostly, the way the office towers reflected the last hour of sun. He paused. 2 men sat down at an outdoor table at a restaurant on 54th Street. I was across the street. I was shooting the building behind them, not them specifically. But they were in the frame. He placed the USB in Mara's hand. The older man passed an envelope to the younger one. They talked for maybe 15 minutes. Then the younger man signed something. 2 pages. I could see that clearly through the lens. They shook hands. The younger man left first. Mara looked down at the drive in her palm. I did not understand what I had photographed, Noah said. Not until Marcus contacted me 3 weeks ago and showed me a name. Cole Whitfield, Mara said, and Preston Ashby. Noah nodded. I had both of them, clear shots, and a photograph of the document. Not readable at that distance, but the signature page is visible. Marcus had it enhanced. He nodded toward the drive. Everything is on there. Video clip, still photographs, and a scanned copy of the enhanced signature page. Mara turned the drive over once in her hand. Small, lightweight, the kind of object that did not look like what it was. She looked at Marcus. You have known about this document for 3 weeks. Yes. And you waited. I waited until you were in the same room as both of them, he said. Because evidence presented in the right place, in front of the right witnesses, does not disappear quietly into a lawyer's filing cabinet. He looked toward the main reception hall. The screen in there, Noah can connect to it. The question is whether you want him to. Mara was standing near the side corridor, deciding when Preston Ashby found her. She did not see him approach. One moment the hallway was empty behind her, and the next he was there. Tall, white-haired, the kind of physical presence that had been refined over decades of rooms where everyone else stood when he entered. He was alone. He had timed it carefully. He sat down across from her at a small table near the corridor wall, without asking permission. He placed a manila folder on the surface between them. It was thick. Labeled with a law firm's letterhead she recognized immediately, one of the 3 most prominent firms in New York State. Miss Sutton, he said. His voice was unhurried, pleasant even. I apologize for the informality of this. I prefer direct conversation. She did not respond. You have had a difficult evening, he continued. I understand that. What you encountered today was unexpected, and I imagine quite painful. And I want you to know I have some sympathy for your situation. He opened the folder with one hand and turned it to face her. However, the document inside was already prepared. She could see her name on the top line. This is a civil complaint, he said. Harassment, invasion of a private event, and defamation of character. It has not been filed. It does not need to be filed. He folded his hands on the table. You are a single mother working a retail job in Queens. I am a sitting state senator with the full resources of a firm that has never lost a civil case of this nature. If this is filed, the process alone, regardless of outcome, will cost you time, money, and energy that I believe you cannot afford. He let that sit for a moment. You have 10 minutes to leave this building, quietly. That is the offer. Mara looked at the document, then at him. $23 in her wallet. A lease she could lose. A job that could receive a phone call on Monday morning. A 4-year-old girl at home with a babysitter waiting for her mother to come back. She thought about all of it. She picked up the folder, looked at it for 3 full seconds, set it back down. Then she stood up, and instead of walking toward the exit, she walked toward the main reception hall. She stopped after 4 steps and turned back. Preston Ashby was watching her with the calm of a man who had never been told no by someone without resources. Mr. Ashby, she said quietly, the woman who helped your daughter put together that legal threat in the powder room tonight. She is also the woman who is going to walk into that room and tell 200 people exactly what you paid for 5 years ago. She paused. Why, you have 10 minutes. She found Marcus exactly where she expected to find him, near the entrance to the main hall, watching the door she had just come through. He was here, she said. I saw him go in. I should not have let that happen. It is fine, Mara said. She surprised herself with how steady her voice was. I need to ask you something before we go in there. He waited. 2 years ago, she said. You knocked on my door. I opened it, and you said wrong floor. His jaw tightened slightly, the first physical tell she had seen from him all night. Yes. Why? He was quiet for a moment, not collecting a story. She could tell the difference. He was deciding how much of the truth to give, and then deciding to give all of it. Because you opened the door, and you were holding Gracie on your hip, and you had flour on your shirt from whatever you had been cooking, and you looked exactly like someone who had built something real out of nothing, and did not need a stranger showing up and making it complicated. He stopped. And I was afraid. That is the honest answer. I was afraid you would see me, and think everything I had done was about guilt or pity, or something I needed from you. And I could not stand the thought of you looking at me that way. Mara looked at him for a long moment. I remember that day, she said. Gracie had just started walking. I made pancakes and burned the first batch, and the smoke alarm went off, and she thought it was the funniest thing she had ever heard. A pause. When I opened the door, you looked at her first, before you looked at me. I noticed that. Marcus did not say anything. I thought you were a neighbor I had not met, she said. I thought you seemed kind. She heard movement from inside the hall, the MC beginning to introduce the next portion of the reception. The window was closing. Are you ready? Marcus asked. She thought of Gracie's drawing, the figure with no face and a yellow circle for a head, the words spelled out in crayon underneath in unsteady letters. She thought of 4 years of mornings getting up alone. Stand beside me, she said. Not behind me. Beside. He nodded once. And as they moved toward the entrance of the hall together, Dottie Crane came through the main door behind them, red notebook in hand, Gracie asleep on her shoulder, small fingers curled around the collar of Dottie's coat. Mara stopped, reached out and touched her daughter's hair once, gently. Gracie did not wake, but her small mouth curved slightly, the way it always did when she felt her mother close. Mara straightened her shoulders and walked in. Noah was already positioned near the AV panel when they entered. The reception was mid-program. The MC had just finished a round of toasts, and guests were settled, attentive, glasses in hand. The large screen at the front of the room, which had been cycling through wedding photographs, was live and connected. Noah looked at Marcus once across the room. Marcus gave a single nod. The screen changed. It happened without announcement, without dramatic music, or without anything except the sudden shift of light at the front of the room that made 200 people look up from their conversations at the same time. First, a photograph, taken from across a midtown street 5 years ago. 2 men at an outdoor table. The image was sharp enough to show expressions. One older, one younger, both composed in the way of people who believe they are not being observed. Preston Ashby. Cole Whitfield. A murmur moved through the room. Second, another photograph. Closer. The younger man's hand on a document, pen in contact with paper, the signature line visible. Third, the enhanced scan, the document itself. Not every word legible, but enough. The date. Both names. And at the bottom, the clause Marcus's team had isolated and enlarged until it could be read clearly from the back of the room. Any and all parental claims arising from the relationship between Cole Whitfield and Mara Sutton are hereby waived in full. The murmur became something louder. Cole stood near the head table. Mara watched his face go through 3 distinct expressions in 4 seconds. Confusion, recognition, and then a stillness that was worse than either. Preston Ashby, who had followed her inside, stopped moving near the back wall. Dottie Crane opened the red notebook. Her voice, when she began reading, was the voice of a woman who had spent 25 years reading official records into courtroom silence. Calm. Clear. Precise. She read the date, the description of the visitor, the amount offered, and the exact words Preston Ashby had used when he told her it would be better for everyone if Mara Sutton moved away. Every phone in the room was recording. Preston said, "This is completely fabricated." No one looked at him. They were looking at the screen. Then Victoria Ashby stood up from the head table, and the entire room went quiet in a different way. The way a room goes quiet when the person nobody expected to speak is the one who opens her mouth. Victoria did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. It was one of the things that made her effective in a courtroom, and, it turned out, in a ballroom. She reached into the small clutch on the table beside her and produced a document, folded in thirds, creased precisely. The kind of document a person carries because they decided days ago they might need it. She unfolded it and held it up. Not dramatically, simply as a statement of fact. "This is the marital agreement my father drafted as a condition of this engagement," she said. Her voice carried clearly without effort. "It includes a clause granting my father's Political Action Committee access to Cole's company assets in the event of a merger with Ashby Holdings, contingent on the marriage remaining intact for a minimum of 3 years. She set the document on the table. "I am an attorney," she continued. "I have been one for 9 years. I am aware of what a document like that means. I am also aware that I signed it without reading it carefully, which is a professional failure I will carry for some time." She turned and looked at her father across the room. Preston had not moved from the back wall. For the first time all evening, he had nothing to say. "I have known about Mara Sutton since last month," Victoria said. "I hired my own investigator when I noticed certain inconsistencies in Cole's timeline. I found the document. I confirmed what my father had arranged 5 years ago." She paused. "I did not come forward then, because I was still deciding what to do. I am done deciding." She removed the engagement ring from her left hand, placed it on the table in front of Cole without anger, without ceremony. "I am sorry," she said, and this part she said directly to Mara, across the room, without qualification. "The offer I made you tonight was wrong. The money does not cover what was taken from you." "Nothing does." She picked up her clutch, nodded briefly to her attorney, Rachel, who had been sitting 3 tables back for the past 40 minutes. Then she looked at her father one final time. "I will see you Monday morning. Bring your lawyer." She walked out of the room through the main entrance, her heels steady, and even on the marble floor, and did not look back once. Cole was still standing. The room had not fully found its voice yet. People were looking at their phones, then at the screen, then at Cole, then at the door Victoria had just walked through. The MC was standing off to the side, holding a microphone he clearly did not know what to do with. Cole looked at Mara, not at Marcus, not at the screen, not at his father-in-law pinned against the back wall. At Mara. "Does she—" He stopped, started again. "Does she look like me?" Mara reached into her small bag and took out her phone. She pulled up a photograph, Gracie at the kitchen table, mid-laugh, eyes bright and gray and unmistakable, and held the screen toward him without walking closer. Cole looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he sat down in his chair, slowly, and put both hands over his face. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was the gesture of a man who had just seen, concretely, what he had signed away. No performance in it. Whatever Cole Whitfield was or was not, the grief in that moment was real. Mara put her phone back in her bag. In the weeks that followed, the events of that evening moved through several channels simultaneously and without coordination, which made them harder to contain than any single narrative would have been. Cole's attorney contacted Mara's within the week, the one Marcus had arranged quietly, a family law specialist, to no charge to Mara, to begin establishing a formal parental record and a trust in Gracie's name. Cole did not contest anything. He made no statement to the press. He showed up to the first scheduled meeting with the attorney, sat across the table, and answered every question. Preston Ashby retained 4 lawyers within 48 hours. It was not enough. The video from the reception had circulated by morning. The State Ethics Board opened a preliminary inquiry by the following Thursday. His Senate office issued a statement that no one found convincing. Victoria filed a civil suit against her father for fraudulent inducement of contract. Her attorney, Rachel, told a reporter off the record that they expected to settle within 6 months. One afternoon, 3 weeks later, Samara came home from her shift to find an envelope on the kitchen table, left by Dottie, who had signed for it. Inside was a single page, a formal letter confirming that a private education trust had been established in Gracie Sutton's name, fully funded through university. The benefactor line read, "Anonymous." But paper-clipped to the back was a small note, no letterhead, no signature, just 7 words in handwriting she was beginning to recognize. She will never have to count pennies. 3 weeks after the wedding, a Tuesday morning, the kind of unremarkable Tuesday that had made up most of Mara's adult life, shift starting at 10, Gracie dropped at preschool by 8:30. 1 hour in between that belonged to no one in particular. She was standing at the kitchen counter with a half-eaten piece of toast when someone knocked at the door of apartment 3B. She opened it. Marcus was standing in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee from the Starbucks 3 blocks over, the one Gracie called the Green Circle store, and an expression that was doing its best to appear relaxed and not quite managing it. "I should have knocked 2 years ago," he said. "I am sorry that I didn't." She looked at the coffee cups, then at him. "How do you know how I take it?" A pause. "Dottie." "Of course." She stepped back from the door. He came in. It was the first time he had been inside. He stood in the small entryway and looked around the way someone looks at a place they have imagined from the outside and are now adjusting to the reality of. The walls were clean, and Gracie's drawings were taped in a row above the radiator, 12 of them, different sizes, a gallery that had been assembled one drawing at a time over months. The kitchen counter had a library book, a half-finished grocery list, and a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, with a paper napkin tucked in as a bookmark. He looked at the book. "I started it last week," Mara said, setting her coffee down. Someone left a note that seemed like it might have been written by someone who had read it. It might have been. Gracie's voice came from the back room. She had apparently not left for school yet, and had just registered that her mother was talking to someone. Footsteps. And then she appeared in the doorway in her coat and backpack, one shoe still untied. She looked at Marcus with the clear, assessing gaze of a child who had not yet learned to pretend. "You were at the fancy place," she said. "You smelled like coffee then, too." "I usually do," Marcus said. Gracie considered this seriously. That is a good smell, she decided. Then she held up her untied shoe. Marcus set down both coffee cups, crouched to her level, and tied it. He did it without being asked twice, without making a performance of it, just tied the lace in a neat bow and looked up at Gracie, who gave him a nod of approval so solemn it could have come from a much older person. Mara stood in the kitchen doorway watching, and something she had been holding tightly in her chest for a very long time came slightly, quietly loose. 2 months later, Mara Sutton started her first semester at Queen's College, Business Administration. Tuesday and Thursday evenings. I won Saturday morning class. The scholarship covered full tuition, applied for and submitted by Dottie Crane 6 months prior, without Mara's knowledge, using documentation Dottie had gathered, with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had spent 2 decades preparing paperwork for judges. When Mara found out, she sat at the kitchen table for a long time without speaking. Then she called Dottie. "You could have told me," she said. "You would have talked yourself out of applying," Dottie said. Mara thought about arguing. She did not, because it was true. The first Tuesday evening class, Marcus drove Gracie to the library 2 blocks from campus and sat with her for 2 hours while she worked through a stack of picture books with the focused seriousness she applied to everything. He brought 2 coffees, one for himself, and one left covered on the table in case Mara stopped in after class, which she did not the first week. The second week she did. She came in at 8:47, still carrying her notebook, and found Gracie asleep in the chair beside Marcus, with her head on his arm and her library books stacked neatly on the table in front of her. Marcus was reading. His old watch caught the lamplight from the reading table. He looked up when she came in, did not say anything, just closed his book and carefully shifted so Gracie did not wake. Mara sat down across from them. "How was it?" he asked quietly. "The professor uses the word leverage approximately every 4 minutes," she said. "That is business school." I took notes anyway. They sat without speaking for a while. Gracie's breathing was slow and even. Outside, Queens moved past the library windows the way it always did. Relentless, ordinary, indifferent to the small, specific things happening inside. On the table beside Mara's notebook, a new Amazon delivery box, opened, held a second book she had ordered after finishing the first 50 pages of Meditations. Women Who Run with the Wolves. She had read the back cover on her lunch break and bought it immediately. "Good choice," Marcus said, nodding at it. "Have you read it?" "No, but I read the reviews when you added it to your cart." A pause. She looked at him. "Dottie," he said, before she could ask. "She mentioned you had been looking at it." Mara shook her head slowly, but the corner of her mouth moved. It was small. It was real. And it was the first time in a very long time she had smiled at something without deciding to first. 6 months after the wedding at the River Cafe, a Wednesday evening in October, the radiator in apartment 3B had started its season, that particular ticking knock that Mara had learned to sleep through in her first winter, there and now barely noticed. Gracie was asleep on the sofa, curled on her side with the stuffed bear and 2 library books she had insisted on bringing to bed and had lasted approximately 4 minutes with before going under completely. Marcus was in the kitchen chair he had gradually come to occupy on Wednesday evenings. Not every Wednesday, he did not assume, but most of them. And Mara had stopped pretending she did not keep an extra coffee cup on the counter now. She was at the table with her textbook open and working through a problem set. The Meditations was on the shelf above the radiator, red, marked throughout, a grocery receipt still tucked in page 44, where she had stopped one night and not gone back yet. Marcus was reading the newspaper, real newspaper, folded in half the way his mentor from his Bronx library days had taught him, a habit that had never left. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms are quiet when the people in them have gotten comfortable with each other's silence. After a while, Mara looked up. "You never replaced it," she said. He looked up from the paper. She nodded at his wrist. The citizen watch, scratched face, worn band, in a room that now quietly contained, among other things, a man worth more money than she would earn in several lifetimes. It was still the same watch. "No," he said. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the hesitation of someone searching for the right answer. The stillness of someone looking at a true one. Because it was there the night I had nothing, he said. And because the person who reminded me that tomorrow was still coming. I never wanted to forget what that cost her. It cost her nothing, practically speaking. 2 minutes and a paper bag. He looked at the watch. But she stopped when no one else did, and I never found a way to make that feel small enough to replace. Mara looked at him for a long time. Then she stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of him, and instead of returning to her side of the table, she sat down in the chair beside him, not across from him. Beside. She opened her textbook again. He opened his newspaper. Gracie slept. Outside, Queens continued being exactly what it always was. And in the morning, when Gracie woke up and padded into the kitchen and found both of them there, Mara making toast, Marcus on his second coffee, she climbed onto the chair between them and announced, with complete 4-year-old certainty, that today she wanted to go to the park and that Marcus should come because he was good at pushing the swings. Marcus looked at Mara. Mara looked at Marcus. "She's not wrong," Mara said. And for the first time in 10 years, Marcus Reed did not need to wonder if tomorrow was still coming. He already knew. And that's where our story ends, friends. If you've made it all the way here, if you're still with us right now, then something in this story touched you. Maybe it was Mara sitting alone at that table, holding herself together when everything inside her was falling apart. Maybe it was Marcus, standing outside a door for years because he was afraid of being too much. Or maybe it was something quieter than that, something you recognized from your own life. Here's what I want to leave you with. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Mara didn't control what Cole did. She didn't control what Preston Ashby paid for. She couldn't unsign that document or unlive those 4 years alone. But she controlled the moment she stood up and walked back into that room. That single choice, to stop protecting silence and start protecting her daughter's truth. That was everything. And Marcus, he waited too long. He knows that. But when it mattered, he stopped standing behind the door and stood beside her instead. That's the whole lesson, really. Not that love saves people, but that the right people stay. If this story meant something to you today, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. Like this video. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. We'll see you next week, friends. Tomorrow is still coming. This story is a work of original fiction created for entertainment and emotional storytelling purposes. All characters, including Mara Sutton, Marcus Reed, Cole Whitfield, Victoria Ashby, Preston Ashby, Dottie Crane, and Gracie, are entirely fictional and do not represent any real individuals, living or deceased. Any resemblance to actual persons, events, or locations is purely coincidental. The places mentioned, including the River Cafe in Brooklyn and Queens College, are real locations used solely as fictional settings to provide authentic atmosphere. No real events took place at these locations in connection with this story. This content is designed to explore themes of resilience, family, quiet kindness, and the courage it takes to tell the truth. Values we believe every viewer can connect with, regardless of their personal background. We do not present this story as news, documentary, or factual reporting of any kind. It is drama, written, produced, and narrated as original creative fiction. Thank you for watching with an open heart.